population of China is going to shrink by half by the end of this century. Fewer people are being born in China than are dying. The population is shrinking. The government itself reports that more than 2 million people were lost from the total population of China just last year, 1.5 million before that. It's going to be exponential, and it's happening in other countries like Japan and Korea. This is a big problem. Listen, John, totally confused here, and maybe you can help clear up something that I've been thinking about. Are there too many people in the world? Or are there too few people in the world? Seems like one day I read articles online about the fact that the world is completely overpopulated and we're heading for disaster. And then the next time I get online, I can read an article about the fact that we are underpopulated and the populations are falling, and that's going to lead to all kinds of disaster. I guess disaster is on the menu for us one way or another. What say you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think both narratives are out there for sure. It's understandable why you're confused about it. Certainly in our lifetime, the major narrative has been one of overpopulation. Mm-hmm. And that has been sort of the impulse or the motivation for promoting abortion and contraceptive here and around the world, and targeting countries where birth rates are still high. And then you couple that to the whole climate change agenda that says that the main problem is that we have too many people in the world who are draining our resources, and that we have dire social disaster on the way because primarily we have too many people. And then you've got more recently, you've got one expose after another of countries that are in decline, and in even a genocide loop, killing themselves off because their failure to reproduce at a rate that replaces the people that are dying. So you've got both narratives out there. Let me give you a quick introduction to the last 100-year narrative on overpopulation that I found on the Population Research Institute website, which is just wonderful. It's short and it's funny, but it's a great explanation about this whole narrative that there are way too many people in the world. Let's take a look.
The myth of overpopulation originated in England in 1798, when a vicar named Thomas Malthus, who fancied himself something of a mathematician, saw that food production increased incrementally, but people reproduced exponentially. He sat down and did some simple math, and summarily decided that the world would be out of food by 1890. He blamed reduced mortality rates, and recommended killing off the have-nots of society, lest the haves starve to death. This cry was taken up by Paul Ehrlich of Stanford University in 1968, who claimed that reckless human reproduction had overwhelmed the Earth. Massive famines would result, which would destroy, best-case scenario, 1/5 of humanity by the end of the 70s, and the planet would follow. This fear produced large donations for the newly created UNFPA, which thrives on an imagined crisis that has been both imminent and rescheduled again and again over the past 2 centuries. The truth of the matter is that every family on this planet could have a house with a yard and all live together on a landmass the size of Texas, which is really just a small corner of the planet. The population of Earth will peak in 30 years and then start to go back down. We're not overpopulated. Do the math.
And, you know, that's really interesting, and I find it so interesting, John, that it was an Anglican minister that really kind of seeded this idea that the world was going to be overpopulated, with the specific observation that people are multiplying, people are having children exponentially, and that our increases in yields of food are not growing in line with that. So it's really a food insecurity issue, probably leading to an idea that there are resources that are just lacking, general resources, lots of different kinds of resources. But the primary resource that spurred this was food. There would not be enough food in the world.
Yeah, though they did expand it even to water. Even though you can't really use up water, that's another issue.
Well, and they've expanded it to now to energy and all kinds of natural resources. They're just not going to be able to keep up with the world's demand. I find that interesting, especially in light of the fact that as these challenges have always come up in how we're going to deal with this world crisis or that world crisis. There is always an invention or a modification of technology, science, scientific understanding or application that helps us get over those hurdles. It's not like
That's right.
it's not like we come up upon these problems and then the scientific community never can figure out a way to address them or fix them.
That's right. In growing populations, you have more inventiveness, you have more brain power, you have more solutions being worked on for the various problems that we face as we move along. That's very encouraging, for sure.
Yeah, if you were to allow me just to riff on this for a minute, because many of our viewers know that in addition to Passion Life as my primary job, I also have a small family farm that I run. And I've studied the Industrial Revolution and all these things. The fact that we are now able to grow more food per acre of land than we've ever been able to grow in the past is specifically an outgrowth of our facing down the existential crisis, if you will, of not having enough food in the world. So science and mechanics and all kinds of different technological inventions have helped us to grow more food per acre, to be able to aerate and cultivate land that was never aeratable or cultivatable before. We're producing high yield crops, higher calorie crops than we ever have in the past. So when
water distribution is getting better, wells are being dug, irrigation systems are put in place, all of that. Yeah.
When Thomas Malthus was coming up with this idea that the food was going to run out, I mean, the idea of a mechanical or not hand powered, but like a water powered flour mill was like brand new to the world. So it's interesting. He was right before that technological advance.
That's right. Yeah.
The last time we talked, John, we talked about the fact that there are certain areas in the world that are hot zones or hotbeds for abortion.
That's right.
And we showed this map, if you remember from the last time we pulled up this map that really shows where those hot zones are, where abortion is most concentrated in the world. And today we're going to kind of look at the mirror image or the photographic negative of that map by kind of looking at where abortion, where in the world babies are still being born. Where birth rates are still high enough to replace populations.
Yeah, that's a great map. It instantaneously shows you where in the world people are having the most babies. And in our map here, the blue areas are showing where we're not having enough children to replace the people who are dying. And then where in the world there is still what historically has been the norm, which is that you replace the generation that's dying and you continue to grow the population at large.
I read this morning that in 1950, the global average was that each family had 5 children. That was the global average in 1950. But that has all changed in recent times.
Yeah, the birth rates have declined dramatically, and in some cases, the marriage rates and the birth rates have dropped again by 50% or more just within the last 5 to 6 to 7 years. So we're talking about a new kind of concern that while people talked about it 20 years ago, now the reality of what's happening in these countries is really speeding up and is an alarm to many of these governments. We talk about this, that the technical term for this is total fertility rate. And again, the Population Research Institute has provided a wonderful little video that explains the whole idea of birth rates or fertility rates around the world and how we should actually be looking at this as a matter of concern, and then how it really relates to all of us, both as Christians and as non-Christians, our attitude toward marriage and family and children at large. So let's take a look at this second little video that explains total fertility rate.
From the time of the cavemen all the way until today, humanity continues to exist because each generation of people has produced another generation to replace itself. Scientists have figured out how many people need to be born each generation to replace the generation before. That number is 1 person per person. All things being equal, this creates perfect demographic balance. Since women are the only ones who can have children, replacing every person on Earth means each woman needs to have 2 children, one to replace her, and the other to replace the man, who cannot have children. The total fertility rate is the average number of children each woman in a society is having. This number shows us if a society is growing or shrinking. In developed countries, the replacement rate birth rate is 2.1 children per woman. This will keep the population stable, but even that is assuming that every woman has children and that there are no wars, famines, or disease. In the real world, disasters happen all the time, and sadly not all children reach adulthood, especially in poor countries. This pushes their replacement rate up to 3.3 children per woman. Since not every woman wants to have children, in order to keep the population stable, some women need to have more than 2.1 children to balance the birth rate with the women who are only having 1 or no children at all. Maintaining this balance is of the utmost importance. If society does not at least replace itself every generation, human numbers begin to fall exponentially. Economic and social problems appear as elderly people retiring begin to outnumber young people entering the workplace. This is already happening all over the developed world. Many of the world's nations are only barely replacing themselves, while a growing majority have birth rates below replacement, some as low as 1.8 or even 1.2 babies per woman. Many societies are facing a very real danger: extinction.
So in light of what we're seeing in the decline of fertility around the world, when I look at the map that you were just showing us about the world and where babies are still being born, you can see that most of the birth rates, the highest birth rates in the world, are largely in Africa. So you look at Planned Parenthood, you look at the United Nations, you look at USAID, and all of these globalist organizations. They look at this map and they say, see, there is the problem. Africa is the problem. They're still having too many babies. We need to liberalize their abortion laws. We need to promote contraception, even promote and legalize homosexuality, which is still illegal in many parts of Africa. I look at that map and I say, there's the greatest hope on earth, because by and large, African culture still holds on to kind of a Christian worldview toward family and children and wealth and prosperity, and equate prosperity and happiness more to family relationships than to just material benefits. I love this quote I found from the author Obianuju Ikiocha. She lives in Nigeria. And she said, the most precious gift that Africans can give to the world right now is our inherent culture of life. Most Africans understand by faith and tradition the inestimable value of human life, the beauty of womanhood, the grace of motherhood, the blessing of married life, and the gift of children. And man, I think that's both a biblical and really needed value in our time today.
It is a really needed value. If you go online and you get in some of these, for instance, if you go on YouTube and you start watching videos about population and overpopulation and resources being extended, climate change, things like that, and you go into the comment section on those videos, you find so many people commenting about what a horrible world this is that we live in. And when you're stuck in traffic, all you think to yourself is, gee, we need more people in this world. John, can you address that? What it means in the mind of younger people when they're sitting in traffic and they're thinking, gosh, we need more people in this world. Of course, that's being facetious. Their idea is we obviously can't have any more people. What's your response to that?
I think for people my age who are in their 60s and 70s now, one of the most painful things of our modern times is how our children have delayed marriage or are resisting marriage, and those who are getting married are choosing not to have children. And I really think this is an influence of public education and the attitude, the narrative on the climate, climate change situation. We just can't bring any more children into the world. The fact of the matter is that you can have everybody stand side by side at arm's length with each other, and stand on the island of Zanzibar. Take no more space up than the island of Zanzibar. You can give every married couple a home and an acre of land to live on, and take up no more space than Texas. So we don't have an overpopulation problem. We actually have the opposite, which is a growing, flourishing country needs a growing population. Just think of it this way. If I sell apples, do I need more people in my village every year or fewer people in my village if I'm going to prosper? And most people recognize you need more
people to buy your apples.
That's right. It's hard to grow an economy, and the proof of that is Japan. Japan's been in decline forever now, for over 25 years. Economic disaster because they don't have a growing population.
Exactly. China is also in that boat. Brazil is in that boat. I think the worst offender as far as total fertility rate, like you were discussing before, as far as I know, the lowest total fertility rate on earth is in South Korea. Is that not correct?
That's correct. They have like 0.07 something, and obviously from the video we watch, you need a 2.1. China's down to 1.09. I think Japan has lost population over the last 8 years. China has lost 2 million people on their total population now in the last year that they counted. I think it's 2023. And that's going to pick up steam. And by the end of this century, China's going to have half the population that they have today. So this is the reality that we're facing, is what we call a demographic decline, or a winter.
Well, when we come back from a quick break, let's discuss some of the implications of that demographic decline and what it's going to mean, and how Christians should think about it, and how Christians should act.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? Passion Life, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
So just for a minute, John, let's circle back to this whole idea of total fertility rate and the fact that it is falling, and what the root causes of that really are. Again, Malthus in the 1700s really thought that it was a matter of food running out. It was a scarcity, fear-based position that led to even influencing Darwin's evolutionary theories. There were all kinds of things that it influenced. It influenced fascist ideas of who needed to be exterminated and why, or who needed to be limited and why. Now that's
or the one-child
out.
Policy in China as well.
Exactly.
I mean,
Another
directly
great
led
example.
to that government policy. Yeah.
Yep. So now it's expanded out. People are afraid to bring children into this world because of they feel like they don't have the resources to buy a home and make a car payment and be able to afford children. In other words, it's an economic, or it's a scarcity mindset, a fear-based mindset, rather than a faith-based mindset that drives people to think that way. It's an amazing thing to stop and consider, to think that the world would run out of resources, or that we would run out of food, when I think I read that about 1.6 billion, with a B, 1.6 billion tons of food are thrown out or wasted or go bad each year on this world. And that if we were to stop eating so much food or stop drinking so much water here in the wealthy West, that would somehow make life better for people in poorer countries who don't have access to clean food and water.
That's right. Just the whole mindset is a tragedy, really, to lay on this generation. I mean, just think about it for a minute. I also grew up in an agricultural area. You live on a farm. I grew up as a kid in a farming community And the farmers now, they can grow 15 times more food on the same acre today than they could, 50, 60 years ago. So that's that breakthrough in technology that you were talking about. But even more than that, it's just the whole mindset that if I eat a potato, that means there's one less potato in the world and that we're going to starve. It fundamentally thinks of us as living in a closed system. We don't live in a closed system. If you take a potato and you cut it up, you got hundreds of potatoes and then thousands, then millions. We don't live in a created world in which we're limited in our food resources.
I've always found it so ironic that people discount the fact when they're thinking in those terms. They discount the fact that it's actually greed and sin that keeps people from having access to food. And it's more of an idea that, for instance, when the United States sends food aid, so much of it by corrupt governments gets sold on the street or gets left in warehouses to keep the people dependent on the government, whatever it is. And it's not really a matter of whether or not there's enough food. It is a matter of whether or not people are going to be able to have access to the food. And in many cases, people don't have access to food because of greed and corruption.
Yeah, there's distribution problems. There's not a lack of food. It's getting it to the right places. War is a disruptor. There is famine and starvation that takes place in the world. Even in China, they lost 45 million people over a 2-year period in China, but there's no lack of food, ability to grow food in China. It was a policy problem at that point. So there are disruptions to the resources that people have, but overpopulation is never the main problem.
So what should Christians do? What is it that Christians need to be able to prioritize in their way of thinking to overcome this fear-based mentality that there are going to be too many people in the world, or the opposite, the fear-based mentality that there are going to be too few people in the world to be able to sustain a comfortable living? Where's the nexus of that question?
My reaction is I don't want to live my life in fear. I just don't. I want to live my life in faith that the God who created me has a plan for my life. He has a way to provide for me. He teaches us to pray for our daily bread and to be generous towards our neighbor. It's a worldview attitude that God is either here and he cares and he's involved, or he's not. I think that in this issue, we can be the most contrarian people today. We can be a counterbalance to all of this. Romans 12 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." This is one area today that I want to be guided by Scripture and God's Word, not by what the world tells me. The second thing that comes to my mind biblically is when I was growing up, the idea of wanting to be married and have kids would be kind of a ho-hum thing. Okay, yeah, so doesn't everybody else? But today that's not the case. And so this scripture really becomes more and more radical, even though previous generations would have thought it to be quite mainstream. Here we got Psalm 127. "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth, and blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them." I mean, that to me is just radical today. I'm going to count my blessings and my sense of reward and wealth by my family and what God gives me as children and as a heritage for my life. That's a radical worldview now, but it's a biblical one.
You nailed it when you talked about the difference between fear and faith for Christians. I was just reading in Numbers the other day about the 10 spies who went in to scout out the land, and the 8 brought the fear report, and Joshua and Caleb brought the faith report and said, we can do this. This is something that God can do. He has the ability to do this. He's not limited in his resources. He can bless us. And if you look into the scriptures, there's nothing wrong with having a big house, but there's nothing in the scriptures that indicates that if you have a big house, you're doing what God wants for your life. You're fulfilling your purpose for your life, or to drive a fancy car, or to be able to even, have all these different things. That's not a measure of success. What's a measure of success in God's eyes is to be faithful and to multiply and fill the earth. We've got Genesis chapter 1 that says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And but it also says in Genesis chapter 1 that we should subdue the earth. We should cultivate the land. We should dominate it. We should steward it. We should have dominion over it. And that's what's happening with these technological increases in food supply.
That's right. That's why I love the fact that you're a farmer as well as a missionary, because you've had to think through so much of farming and preserving the land and raising nutritious food for people, and people flock all over the place to buy your food. I know they do because it's healthy and it's based on a kind of a biblical worldview of managing the resources rather than wasting them. So that's commendable.
The world tells us the lie that we will find safety and security and happiness and fulfillment in unchecked material consumption. That's why you're going to get people who live in big cities saying, I don't want to have children because there are too many people in this world. Whereas if you fly over the United States, you see that there's plenty of land left for people to thrive on and grow on and live on. It's amazing if you stop and think about it, that the answer to the world's problems it's always been in the Bible. It's always right there, John. I mean, that's the Christian experience. Following the Lord's commands to be fruitful, marry, fill the earth, settle down, buy a house, plant a garden, contribute to society. These are the answers to the world's biggest problems.